The day our little town's past came rattling back. It didn't arrive with thunder or sirens or some big dramatic speech. It slipped in through a metal slot on the side of the library. I was standing right there when it happened. Now, I don't work at the library. Let me be clear about that. I'm just one of those women who treats the place like a second living room. When you've lived in the same small Georgia town your whole life, you collect safe places like other folks collect magnets. And that brick library on Magnolia Street has always been one of mine. That particular Monday morning, I'd stopped in with a banana bread for Miss Carroll, our head librarian, because she'd had a rough week. The county commission had been flapping their jaws about budget cuts and digital futures. And every time those words come out of a politician's mouth, a librarian somewhere gets a headache. So there I was, banana bread wrapped in foil under my arm, smelling like nutmeg and butter, when I saw Miss Carroll shuffle over to the metal book drop by the front door. Her gray bob was a little frizzier than usual, and she had that look on her face like she was already arguing with some invisible board member in her head. She pulled down the handle to open the return box, just like she does every morning. And then she froze. I mean froze. One hand on the handle, the other still halfway reached out, her whole body gone stiff like somebody had hit the pause button on her. I'd never seen her do that before. "Carol," I called, talking a step closer. "You all right, honey?" She didn't answer right away, just stared down into that metal mouth like it had hissed her name. After a heartbeat or two, she reached in, her face gone pale as library paste. When her hand came back up, it was holding a book wrapped in brown paper, neat as a present, edges worn soft with age. For a second, I just saw a book somebody forgot to unwrap. Then I saw the look in her eyes. "June," she whispered, like she was afraid to speak any louder in case the book heard her. "You need to see this. There are sentences in life you don't ignore. This was one of them." I hurried the rest of the way over, banana bread forgotten, and peered into the drop box. A couple of bright plastic-covered kids' books lay inside, glossy and familiar. Nothing scary, nothing special. But the thing in her hand, the paper around it, was old-fashioned, the kind my mama used to wrap school books in so we could draw on the covers. Somebody had taken time with it, folded corners, twine-tied in a tidy bow. Right there on the front, in faded blue ink, were 3 words in careful, looping handwriting. "Please return this." That was strange enough. Most folks just heave their books into the slot and call it a day. But what really set the hair up on my arms was the second line, written smaller beneath. "I'm so sorry. EP. Someone's dramatical," I murmured, trying to lighten the mood. That's a mighty fancy way to avoid a late fee. Miss Carroll didn't laugh. Instead, she turned the bundle over, feeling along the spine through the paper. Her fingers landed on the spot where the library's old stamp usually sits, and she sucked in a breath. "It has our mark," she said. "This is one of ours." "Well, that's the idea," I replied, brows raising. "That's kinda how libraries work. We send 'em out, they bring 'em back." She shook her head sharply, a quick little motion that sent her glasses slidden down her nose. "No, I mean, one of the old ones," she said, "from before we switched systems, before computers. June, this is from the card catalog days. For anybody who grew up tapping on screens and search bars, a card catalog probably sounds like something from a museum. But I remember those little wooden drawers with their brass handles like old friends. I used to stand on tiptoe just to flip through the cards, the sound of them shuffling like paper bird wings. You think somebody found this in their attic? Asked. Maybe cleaned out a box, finally decided to make amends to the library gods. That's what I'd assume, she said slowly. Except she carried the bundle to the front desk like she was talking communion, set it down gentle, and started undoing the twine. The knot gave with a dry little snap. The paper unfolded with that soft crackle old things make, like they're whacking up from too long sleep. Underneath was a cloth-bound hardcover the color of faded denim. Edges were frayed, corners bumped. A small gold title was stamped on the spine, The House on Willow Creek. I didn't recognize it, but Miss Carroll did. Her face changed, just for a second, like somebody had opened a door behind her eyes. "Oh my lord," she breathed. "I haven't seen this one in," she trailed off, and instead flipped the book open to the front, fingers moving, with instinct born of decades behind that desk. There, inside the front cover, was the old pocket for the checkout card. Not a barcode in sight, just a little envelope, yellowed and thin, with the town library's name stamped crooked in purple ink. "You still keep the cards?" I asked, leaning in till I could smell the old paper and the faint hint of musty vanilla that clings to books that have seen more summers than I have. "Not the loose ones," she said. "We boxed most of them when we went digital, but the pockets in the books themselves stayed. Nostalgia, I guess." She slid the card halfway out with 2 fingers. The paper looked delicate, like dried petals. A list of names marched down in faded ink, each with a date stamped beside it. Most of them were from the late 60s and early 70s. Familiar family names: the Harpers, the Mills, the ever-present Donnellys. My eyes snagged on the last line. Name: Alina Price. Date due: June 10, 1976. Something cold slid down my spine. 50 years, I said quietly. 50 years, 2 months and change, Miss Carroll corrected automatically. Give or take a few days. This book left this building before you had your driver's license. I did the math in my head and winced. "All right, no need to say it out loud," I said. "I'm sensitive." She barely smiled. "Alina never brought it back," she said, tapping the card lightly where the staff initials should have been. "And you know how I know that? Because you never forget a book napper," I guessed. "Because if she had, there'd be another stamp right here, even if we'd boxed the card later," she said. "Somebody would have checked it in. Someone would have run it past the desk. This card is frozen in time." She glanced toward the windows, where the morning light was climbing higher over the town square. "And yet this book just came up through our drop box," she added, like it stepped out of 1976 this morning and asked what it missed. The name on that card wasn't just ink for me. It was a girl in a yellow dress, laughter floating, up from the creek behind the high school, a whisper of perfume in the church choir loft. It was a face in a yearbook that my whole generation remembered for reasons we didn't talk about much. She checked it out right before I began, then stopped, throat tightening. Miss Carroll nodded, her expression somber. "A week before she disappeared," she said, "I remember shelving it. I remember wondering why she'd picked a book about a girl running away from a haunted house when she was so quiet herself. I reached out and steadied myself on the edge of the desk. Our town doesn't have a lot of unsolved mysteries. We're more of a who brought what casserole to the funeral, who's fixin' the stop sign kind of place. But every tight-knit community has one story it circles around like a bruise you can't help touching. For us, that story was Alina. She was 17 when she vanished the summer of 76. She'd gone to the library in the afternoon, told her mama she was studying for exams. She never made it home for supper. There'd been searches, flyers stapled to telephone poles, prayer circles. There were whispers, theories, quiet accusations tossed around behind closed doors. And then, like pond water after stone, the surface smoothed over. Folks got older. The posters came down. The questions got folded and tucked into the back of the town's collective mind. people who'd loved her never forgot. And now, here was this book. I thought they threw it away, I murmured, my voice barely above the quiet hum of the air conditioner. Her mama, I remember folks saying she boxed up Alina's room after a while. Said she couldn't stand looking at the empty bed. Miss Carroll shook her head slowly. Somebody kept this, she said, somewhere, all this time. And somebody decided, after 50 years, to bring it back. She touched the front of the book, fingertips resting right over the title like a blessing. This isn't about a late fee, she said. This is a message. I swallowed. Well, I said, trying to steady my voice. Librarians are good at reading messages. She glanced at me, the question in her eyes matching the one in my own. Where do we start? I asked. She held up the card. With the only clue we've got, she said. And with you. With me. I repeated, startled. You were in her grade, Miss Carroll reminded me. You knew her. I was just the lady behind the counter back then. If this is the universe knocking on the front door of this town after half a century, I figure the person answering ought to be somebody who heard that first knock. I looked down at the name again. Alina Price. The letters swam for a moment, blurring, with memories I'd kept in the back of my own mental attic. I'd spent years telling myself that certain chapters of my life were over, shelved, closed. That the questions I'd had as a girl could stay in their boxes. But sometimes, the past doesn't stay politely where you put it. Sometimes, it comes back through a slot in a library wall, wrapped in brown paper and regret. I straightened my shoulders. All right, I said. Then, let's go find out why a book waited 50 years to come home. You gotta understand who Alina was to me back then. In high school, she was the kind of girl you might overlook if you weren't paying attention. Not the loud one in the front row, not the homecoming queen, not the troublemaker smocking behind the gym. She was the quiet kind of pretty that sneaks up on you. All big brown eyes and dark hair she wore in a low ponytail. She always had a book with her. In the cafeteria, in the bleachers, even once in line at the Dairy Queen. I remember her standing there with a swirl cone in one hand and a paperback in the other, reading between bites. We weren't best friends. We floated in different circles, like so many kids in a small school do. But we shared enough classes and enough smiles that I knew the outline of her life. Her daddy worked nights at the plant. Her mama cleaned houses. They lived in a little white place out on Willow Creek Road. I knew she sang alto in the church choir, and that she'd blush to the roots of her hair if you complimented her shoes. And I knew this. She was close to my cousin Tommy. Tommy was my mama's sister's boy, lanky and restless, always smelling like motor oil and Marlboros. He worked on cars in old man Dillard's garage after school and had a laugh that made girls look up from their lockers. He and Alina had this nervous orbit going, pass each other in the halls like two planets almost ready to collide. I'd catch him looking at her, quick and sidelong, and her looking away too fast. If you'd asked me at 16 if I thought they were in love, I'd have rolled my eyes and said, they're just kids. But now, sitting here on the far side of 60, I know better. Sometimes the love you feel before you have language for it is the purest kind. All that to say, when Alina disappeared, it wasn't just some crime story on the evening news. It was my cousin's heart cracking. It was our whole junior class losing a piece of itself, and for 50 years, nobody knew what happened. At least, that's what we believed. Back at the library table, I ran my finger under Alina's name on the card like I might feel something rise up from the ink. She was here that day, I said. She walked right past this desk, stood in this carpet, breathed this same air. Miss Carroll nodded. I remember she wore a yellow dress, she said quietly. Isn't that strange, the things you keep? I forget what I had for breakfast, but I remember that dress. Some details get glued down, I said. Other ones just float off. We sat there in silence for a moment, the sounds of the library moving soft around us. A page turned. A child whispered. The printer coughed. Then Miss Carroll squared her shoulders. "All right," she said. "Detective agency of 2. What's our first move?" I thought about it. "Her mama's gone," I said, "but her brother's still around. Lives out by the old feed store. You remember Daniel?" "I do," she said. "He comes in sometimes for fishin' magazines. Quiet as ever." "Well, quiet or not, if anybody knows why a book-a-leaner checked out in 1976 came wanderin' back into your drop box this morning, it might be him," I said. "Or at least he deserves to know that something of hers has come home." Miss Carroll hesitated. "You think it'll hurt him?" she asked. "Drag it all back up." "It'll hurt either way," I said. "But I'd rather be hurt with the truth in my hand than with questions in my throat." She studied me, then nodded. "Will you go?" she asked. I didn't answer with words. I just reached for the book, feeling the weight of it pulling at my palm. "It's on my way home," I said. "I'll let you know what he says." Daniel's place looked smaller than I remembered. When we were kids, it seemed huge, a house with a creek in the back and a barn that smelled like hay and oil. Now the paint was peeling a bit, the porch sagging. A plastic chair sat by the door, and a pair of muddy boots waited beside it. I parked by the ditch and turned off the engine. For a moment, I just sat there, hands on the wheel, looking at that front door. There are visits you make with a casserole and easy words. This wasn't one of those. I grabbed the book from the passenger seat and walked up the path, gravel crunching under my flats. When I knocked, I heard the shuffle of feet and the scrape of the chain. Door opened a crack, then wider. Daniel had a leaner's eyes. I'd never noticed as sharply as I did in that moment. Brown and soft and tired around the edges. His hair had gone from chestnut to mostly gray, and there was a deep groove between his brows that hadn't been there at 17. "June," he said, surprised. "Well, I'll be. What brings you way out here?" "Neighborhood outreach," I said weakly, then shook my head. "Can I come in for a minute? I got something you need to see." He stepped back, holding the door wider. "House ain't much," he said, "but you're welcome." The living room was neat in that bachelor who was raised by a meticulous mother sort of way. Old recliner, coffee table with coasters, TV remote aligned just so. A framed photo of his mama on a side table, and next to it, one of a leaner, younger even than I remembered, in a sundress, holding a little dog I'd forgotten they had. "She hated leaving that dog alone," he said, following my gaze. "Mama kept saying he'd be fine, but she insisted on rushing home every day after school to let him out." His voice had that distant sandpaper sound grief leaves behind. I sat on the edge of the couch and laid the book on the table between us. "I was at the library this morning," I said. "This came through the drop box." He frowned, leaning forward. When he saw the title, his hand went to his mouth. "I'll be damned," he whispered. He reached out, fingers hovering over the cover, then finally settling, there like it might vanish if he pressed too hard. "I haven't seen this since." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. "She checked it out the week she disappeared," I said softly. "Her name's still on the card." He opened the front cover with both hands, so gentle it made my throat ache. When he saw her name, he closed his eyes. "That's her handwriting," he said. "I'd know it anywhere." Pointed at the brown paper, folded neatly under the book. "It was wrapped," I said, "with a note. Please return this, I'm so sorry. EP," he jerked his head up. "EP," he repeated. "You sure? That's what it says." He sank back in his chair, looking like someone had pulled a plug in him. "I kept thinking I'd get something like this," he said quietly. "Not the book exactly, but a sign, a letter, a postcard from some place out west saying, 'I'm all right, Daniel. I just had to go.'" "You think she ran away?" I asked, careful. He stared at the ceiling. I used to, he said. Then I didn't. Then I did again. The mind's a cruel thing. It gives you a new theory every time you think you made peace with the old one. He picked up the book and turned it over in his hands. Where'd this come from? He asked. It can't have just appeared. It didn't walk itself to the drop box, I said. Somebody brought it. They might have done it in the night. They might have meant it as an apology, or as a way to erase something. I don't know. He ran his thumb along the spine. I had a box, he said suddenly, of her things. Mama made one too, but I made my own. Ticket stubs, notes she left me, stupid stuff. This book was in it. I blinked. You had it? I asked. He nodded. I found it under her bed after she disappeared, he said. Nobody was thinking about library books when the sheriff and his men were tromping through the house. Mama was in shock. Daddy was yelling at everybody. I was the only one who noticed. I picked it up and hid it in my closet. Why? I asked. He swallowed. Because it smelled like her, he said. Because it was the last thing I knew she'd touched that nobody else had touched after. Because I thought if I kept it safe, maybe she'd show up and ask for it back. My heart folded in on itself a little. Did you ever read it? I asked. Parts, he said. It's about a girl who keeps hearing things in her family's old house. Everybody tells her she's imagining it. Turns out the house is full of secrets nobody wants to admit. It felt familiar. He looked at me. I never told anybody I had it, he admitted. Not Mama, not the police, not you. It felt like mine, my piece of her. So how did it get from your closet to the library drop box 50 years later? I asked. He chuckled bitterly. That's the question, ain't it? He said. Do you still have that box? I asked. He shook his head. I thought I did, he said. I kept it under my bed for years. Then after Mama died, I was cleaning out the house and I went looking for it. It was gone. Gone how? I pressed. He rubbed his eyes. I don't know, he said. I thought maybe I'd moved it to the attic and forgot. Maybe I'd gotten drunk one night and I don't even know. I tore this place apart. Never found it. I thought back to the neat wrapping, the careful handwriting. Somebody had that box, I said slowly. Somebody who knew what that book meant. And for some reason, they decided to send this one piece of it home. He looked at me, a spark of something sharp in his gaze. I can think of one person, he said. Who? Tommy, he said, your cousin. I hadn't heard my cousin's name spoken in that tone in a long time. Why would Tommy have it? I asked, though my stomach already had opinions. Because I gave it to him, he said, years ago. I leaned back, memories rearranging themselves. After Alina disappeared, Tommy had been a mess. He'd punched a dent in his truck door. He'd quit the garage, then gone back, then quit again. He'd sat on our back steps smoking cigarette after cigarette, jaw locked, saying almost nothing. One night he'd shown up at my house with a brown paper bag and asked if Daddy could give him a ride to the bus station. I'd been eavesdropping from the hallway, heart pounding. I gotta get out of here, he'd said. Every corner of this town's got her ghost in it. Daddy had told him he was being dramatic. Mama had said he was running from grief. Tommy had gone anyway, headed up north for a few years, drifting from job to job before drifting back again when his daddy got sick. I realized now there was a part of that story I didn't know. What else did you give him? I asked. Daniel shrugged. Little stuff, he said. I couldn't look at it anymore. Every time I opened that box, it was like picking at a scab. I thought maybe if I gave it to somebody who loved her different from how I did, they could hold it without bleeding all over it. How long ago was this? I said. 10 years, he guessed. Maybe 15. Time blurs. We sat there, the air between us thick. Have you asked him about it? I finally said. No, he admitted. Tommy and we don't talk much anymore. Because of her, I asked. He hesitated. Because of what happened after, he said. That's how it goes in families. Something awful happens, and there's the pain of the awful thing. And then there's the extra pain of all the ways people hurt each other trying to make sense of it. Back in '76, after the search parties and the prayer vigils, after the sheriff's office quietly rolled up their maps and said they'd keep the file open, the town did what towns do. It started looking for somewhere to put the anger. Some of it settled on the adults. Why'd her parents let her walk home alone? Why'd the school let kids wander off campus at lunch? Why wasn't there more light on Willow Creek Road? Some of it settled on the boys. Tommy got his share. So did Daniel. Somebody must know something, folks whispered over grocery carts. Girls don't just vanish. At first, the two boys clung to each other like shipwreck survivors. I remember seeing them sitting at the far edge of the football field, shoulders pressed together, not talking. Then I started seeing them less together. Then not at all. My senior year, they wouldn't stand on the same side of the hallway. Nobody ever told me exactly what words passed between them, but you could feel the crack down the middle of our little world. And here we were, 50 years later, still talking around it. Maybe this is your chance, I said to Daniel, to ask, to bring it up without it just sounding like old ghosts. He looked at me, fear and curiosity wrestling under his wrinkles. You think I want to? He asked. I thought about all the times I'd rehearsed confrontations in my head with people who'd long moved states away or passed on. All the imaginary conversations where I finally said what I'd swallowed. There's wantin' to and there's needin' to, I said. Those are different. Which one is this? He exhaled. I don't know, he admitted. All I know is that box didn't walk to him by itself, and this book didn't walk back here on its own either. At the book again, hands spread across the cover like he was keeping it from floating away. If he had that box, and this is all he sent back, he said slowly. We don't know it was him, I cut in. We're guessing, he nodded. You're right, he said. I've spent my whole life filling in blanks with worst-case scenarios. Maybe it's time I ask for the sentences instead of macking them up. There was a long silence. You talked to him, he said suddenly. He might tell you more than he'd tell me. I blinked. Me, I said. Why me? Because you're family to both of us, he said. Because you weren't in love with her. Because you've got that way of looking at folks that makes them say things they didn't plan to say. I opened my mouth to protest, then shut it. There are assignments life hands you that you didn't apply for, but you know in your bones are yours. All right, I said quietly. I'll try. I picked up the book, holding it close. I'm keeping this for now, I told him. Not to take it from you. Just till I talk to Tommy. He nodded, eyes glistening. Tell him I didn't throw it away, he said. Tell him I trusted him with it. He might have forgotten that part. Tommy lived on the other side of town, in a small rental behind the mechanic shop he managed. By the time I pulled into the gravel lot, the sun was leaning west. The smell of oil and hot rubber hung in the air, men's voices drifting from under hoods. I knew better than to march into a bay, so I went round to the side door that led to the little office. The open sign was still flipped, but the room was empty, just a counter, a bulletin board with business cards, and a faded pin-up calendar from a year nobody'd bothered to tear months off of. I waited, book tucked under my arm, until I heard the back door creak, and Tommy appeared, whipping his hands on a rag. He stopped short when he saw me. Well, I'll be damned, he said, one corner of his mouth lifting. If it ain't Junebug. Only Mama gets to call me that, I said automatically. But I'll let it slide this once. He tossed the rag on the counter. What brings you to my fine establishment? He asked. Car mackin', a funny noise. Need an oil change. Want me to rotate your tires and your life choices. Just your life choices, I said, though I might let you peek at my tires if this goes well. He snorted. You sound like you're about to sell me insurance, he said. What's going on? I set the book on the counter between us and turned it so he could see the title. His face went still. I saw it, just a flicker, but it was there. Recognition, like a match struck in the dark. "Where'd you get that?" he asked, voice flatter. "It came through the library drop box this morning," I said, wrapped up like a gift that took its sweet time, with a note. "Please return this. I'm so sorry." He stared at it, then looked up at me. "Thought libraries forgave late fees after a certain point," he said softly. "This isn't about late fees," I said, echoing Miss Carroll. "This is about a girl who disappeared 50 years ago, and the people who loved her, and the people who might know more than they've ever said." Silence settled between us, buzzing with unsaid things. "I just came from Daniel S., I said. "He told me he gave you a box once, with this book in it." Tommy's jaw worked. "He shouldn't have done that," he muttered. "Why?" I asked. "Because I ain't exactly known for taking care of fragile things," he said. "He trusted me with a piece of his sister, and he trailed off." "And you what?" I pressed gently. He blew out a breath. "And I ran," he said, "like I always did back then." "You kept the box?" I asked. "For a while," he said. "Took it with me when I left town." Stupid, I know. Like talking your heartbreak on vacation. I'd drag it from crappy apartment to crappy apartment. Some nights, when the beer wasn't cutting it, I'd open it up, take out that book, read a few pages, smell her shampoo in the paper, remember the way she'd bite her lip when she was thinking. His eyes had gone far away. Then one night, he said, I got tired. Tired of carrying a box of ghosts around. Tired of whacking up in the middle of the night with my chest pounding, 'cause I dreamed I was back at that creek looking for her. So I took it out to the dumpster behind the building, and I held it over the bin, and I just stood there. He swallowed hard. I couldn't do it, he admitted. Couldn't throw her away. So I did the next dumbest thing. Which was, I asked. I opened it, he said. Took out the book, just the book, wrapped it up, wrote a note. Please return this, I'm so sorry. Then I mailed it. Mailed it, I repeated. To who? To the library, he said. Addressed it right to him. I figured maybe it was, I don't know, a peace offering. A way of saying, sorry I didn't bring her back, at least I can bring this. My heart squeezed. When? I asked. A long time ago, he said. 10 years more. I was living up in Nashville then. I barely remember what I had for lunch last Tuesday, June. But I remember standing in that post office with that stupid package and feeling like if I dropped it in the slot, maybe the ache would loosen. And did it? I asked quietly. He thought for a moment. No, he said, at least not right away. But I did start sleeping a little better. I started drinking a little less. Started thinking maybe I could come home without drowning in it. I frowned. The package never arrived, I said. At least not then. If it had, folks would have talked. Carol would have told me. This just showed up today. He blinked. Well, the U.S. mail ain't what it used to be, he said weakly. I shook my head. This isn't a lost in the mail situation, I said. Somebody put this in the library drop box last night or early this morning. It wasn't battered. It wasn't rain warped. It was wrapped neat as you please. He stared at me, then at the book, then back. That's not possible, he said. Unless somebody else had it, I finished. Somebody who got that package from Nashville and decided to hold on to it. Somebody who waited a decade or more to follow your instructions. Who? He asked. That's what I'm trying to figure out, I said. He rubbed the back of his neck. I put my return address on it, he said, in the corner, in case it couldn't be delivered. You sure? I asked. He nodded. I might have been drowning, but my mama didn't raise me to send anonymous mail, he said. I used to picture Carol opening it, seeing my name, calling me, yelling at me. I was almost looking forward to it. Might have felt good to be punished. Did she ever call? I asked. Nope, he said. Since you're standing here looking like this is brand new news, I'm guessing she never saw it, which meant somebody intercepted it. The library's mail usually went straight into Carol's hands. But there was a time, I suddenly remembered, when someone else had been in charge. "Do you remember when Carol had her surgery?" I asked. "Her knee," he said. "Yeah, she was out for a few months." "Who filled in for her at the desk?" I asked. He thought. "That board member," he said. "What was her name?" "Always smelled like white diamonds and carried a clipboard." "Margaret Lee," I said. A picture formed in my mind. Margaret, with her severe haircut and tighter than necessary cardigans, standing behind the counter like she owned every book on the shelf. She'd been head of the library board for years, always pushing for more structure, more rules, more oversight. She'd also been Alina's aunt. Memories shifted. When we were teenagers, Margaret was the aunt who'd come to pick Alina up early from church youth group, lips tight, jaw set. She never smiled much, never seemed to like our noise. I assumed she was just one of those women who prefer order to joy. What I didn't know then, and learned much later, was that Margaret had been furious with Alina's parents for letting that girl run wild. I didn't understand it at the time. Run wild how? Alina did her homework and read books. Her version of rebellion was sneaking an extra chapter under the covers. But in Margaret's world, a girl walking home from the library alone, a girl saying she wanted to go to college in Atlanta, a girl talking about written stories instead of Marion, the boy from down the road, that was wild. If a package had arrived at the library, addressed from Tommy, containing Alina's book and a note signed EP, and Margaret had been the one sorting mail, I could picture it. I could picture her seeing that handwriting, feeling that old hurt and judgment rise up, and deciding she knew what was best. For decades, she decided what was best for everyone. Maybe she'd done it then too. "I think we need to talk to her," I said. Tommy snorted. "Good luck," he said. "Last time I saw her in the Piggly Wiggly, she pretended not to see me and knocked over a display of canned yams." "She's retired from the board now," I reminded him. "Lives in that duplex by the Methodist church. Fusses at kids for riding their bikes too fast." He shrugged. "You're the brave one," he said. "If she slams the door in your face, call me. I'll bring tools." "Don't you go threatening assault with a tire iron," I said. "This is still a library mystery, not a true crime podcast." He cracked a smile. "You always did manage to make me laugh when I wanted to punch something," he said. "Be careful, June." "I've been scared of that woman since Sunday school," I said. "But I'm even more tired of this town living in the shadow of a girl none of us got to see grow old. It's time we aired out the attic." Margaret answered her door like she always did, chain on, one eye squinting through the gap. "Who is it?" she demanded, even though my face was right there. "It's June," I said. "I brought you some banana bread." Her nose twitched. "You always did know how to bribe a body," she said. He shut the door, unhooked the chain, and opened it again. "Well, don't just stand there letting flies in." Her duplex was spotless. Not just clean spotless. No magazines on the coffee table, no shoes by the door. The couch cushions all perfectly aligned. A faint, familiar cloud of white diamonds perfume hung in the air, layered over lemon cleaner. "Sit," she ordered, gesture flicking at the sofa. I got Wheel of Fortune on mute. They've gotten stingy with the prizes. Sat, book in my lap, foil-wrapped bread in my hands like a peace treaty. "I won't take up much of your time," I said. "You already have," she sniffed. "Might as well make it worth my while." I set the bread on the table and then, very deliberately, laid the book beside it. Her eyes went straight to it. The color drained from her face. "Where did you get that?" she whispered. "It came back to the library this morning," I said, "through the drop box, wrapped up with a note. Please return this. I'm so sorry." "EP," she pressed her fingertips to her lips. "That's impossible," she said. "Is it?" I asked. She looked up sharply. "What are you accusing me of, June Carter?" she demanded. "Not a thing," I said calmly. I'm asking questions. Because Tommy says he mailed this book to the library years ago. Says he put his return address in the corner. Says he never heard a word about it. Says it never showed up. Her jaw tightened. "And," she said. "And I remember," I continued, "around that same time, Carol had her knee replaced. You were helping out at the desk, sorting mail, seeing things before anybody else did." Silence flooded the room. "I also remember," I said, softer now, "how hard you took it when Alina disappeared. I remember the things you said about her parents, about girls with too much freedom, about influence." Her eyes had gone bright with anger and something else. "You got a good memory for other people's sins," she snapped. "Says the woman who kept a ledger for the whole town," I said gently. "I'm not here to shame you, Margaret. I'm here because a book came home after 50 years, and somebody wanted that to mean something." She stared at the cover as if it might open its own mouth and start talking. "I did get a package," she said finally, voice thin. I sat very still. "It came in the mail one Tuesday," she said. "Brown paper, addressed to the library. Return address from Nashville, name I recognized." I was halfway to opening it when I saw the corner. "Turner, Tommy," I said. She nodded. "I knew he was back in town off and on," she said. "Saw his mama now and then." But that envelope, it took me right back to that summer. To seeing him and Alina whispering under the bleachers. To hearing the sheriff ask him questions. He answered too quick. "You thought he had something to do with it," I said, not accusing, just naming it. "I don't know what I thought," she snapped. "What I knew was my niece walked into that library and never walked home. What I knew was some boy with grease under his nails and big ideas had been sniffing around her, filling her head with notions. What I knew was pain." She looked at me, eyes glittering. "When I saw his name on that package, I thought, what right does he have to send anything with her name attached?" She continued. "Then I saw the note, her initials, EP, like she'd written it herself." Her voice cracked. "For a minute," she whispered, "my heart stopped. I thought maybe she was alive. Maybe she'd been with him all this time. Maybe stupid, I know. But grief makes fools of us all." "It's not stupid," I said softly. "Hope is a stubborn thing." She shook her head. "I opened it," she said. "I saw the book, the card, her handwriting, my handwriting on the pocket. I smelled our old house in those pages. And I could not bear the thought of that thing sitting on a shelf for children to smear peanut butter on." "So what'd you do?" I asked. "I took it home," she said. "Put it in the bottom drawer of my dresser. Told myself I was protecting it. Told myself the library didn't need more reminders of the one story everybody wanted to forget." "And the note?" I asked. She looked away. "I burned it," she said quietly, "in a little dish in my kitchen sink." Stood there watching the letters curl, thinking, how dare he use her initials like that? How dare he speak for her? How dare he ask for forgiveness on her behalf when the only one who had the right to do that was her? I felt the old anger and sorrow twist together inside me. "So for years," I said slowly, "you slept with her book in your dresser?" "Yes," she said. "And then last night," I continued, "you put it in a bag, wrote the same words he did on the front, and dropped it through the slot." She blinked. "How did you?" she began. "Because somebody who loved her wanted this done right," I said. "And you're the only one I can think of who's stubborn enough to keep a book hostage for a decade and then send it home with a flourish." She let out a breath that sounded like 50 years. "I was going through my things yesterday," she said. "Doctor told me to think about downsizing. Blood pressure, bones, all that fun stuff. I got to that drawer, saw that blue cover, and I realized I'd been holding onto it for the wrong reasons." "What reasons?" I asked. "I told myself I was preserving her memory," she said. "What I was really doing was preserving my anger, my resentment, my need to blame somebody, anybody, so I didn't have to sit with the truth that sometimes bad things happen and you never get answers. She looked at me, defeated. I took that book out and I thought, Alina loved that library. It was her refuge. I took a piece of it from her. Maybe it's time to give it back. So you wrapped it, I said. Like Mama taught me, she said, nice and neat. I even wrote the words Tommy had written. Please return this. I'm so sorry. And are you? I asked quietly. She swallowed. For a lot of things, she said. For how hard I was on her. For how much pressure I put on her mama. For all the times I talked about her like she was a problem to be solved instead of a girl who wanted a bigger life than the one I thought was safe. And for keeping that book hostage, I added. Yes, she said, for that too. We sat there, two old women in a too clean room, the ghosts of younger versions of ourselves hovering in the corners. You know what I wish, I said. What? She asked warily. That you'd told somebody when that package came, I said. That you'd handed it to Carol and said, I'm not ready to see this on a shelf yet, but please keep it safe for me. That way, you'd have had help carrying it. She gave a humorless little laugh. Help carrying anything was not in my vocabulary, she said. Not then, not for a long time. It's not too late to learn, I said. She looked at me, eyes suddenly wet. You got a lot of nerve common in here, digging up bones, she said. But maybe somebody needed to. Daniel deserves to know, I said. Tommy, too, that you saw that book. That you made a choice. That you're sorry. Her shoulders sagged. I don't know how to say those words, she admitted. I'll help, I said. But some of them gotta come from your own mouth. The next week, we did something I'd never have predicted in my younger days. We had a tiny meeting in the library's back room. The players, Daniel in a clean flannel, hands shoved deep in his pockets. Tommy, jaw set, thumb tapping against his leg. Margaret, back stiff as the rolling ladder by the shelves, me. And Miss Carol, hovering in the doorway like a referee. The book sat in the middle of the table on a folded towel, like something sacred. Nobody wanted to be the first to speak. Finally, I cleared my throat. We're not here to solve a crime, I said. We're not the sheriff. We're not CSI. There's a good chance we will leave this room with as many factual answers about Alina's disappearance as we came in with. Tommy scoffed. Sounds like a fun party, he muttered. But I went on. We are here to solve something else. Or at least start. We are here to stop letting this one awful thing keep twisting the rest of our lives into knots. I nodded at the book. This came home after 50 years, I said. That's not an accident. That's an invitation. Daniel looked at Margaret. You got mail, he said, voice rough. You didn't share it, she flinched, but held his gaze. I was wrong, she said simply. The room went so quiet I could hear the clock in the hallway. I let my grief run the show, she continued. I saw your pain, and instead of sitting in it with you, I turned it into anger. I turned it into blame. I blamed your parents. I blamed this town. I blamed that boy. She flicked her eyes toward Tommy. I thought if I could assign guilt, it would feel less like the world was random and cruel. Her hands shook. When that book came to my desk, she said, I saw an opportunity to control something, so I took it. I took your chance to hold a piece of your sister. I took his attempt at doing one small thing right. I told myself I was protecting her memory, but I was really protecting myself from feeling helpless. She swallowed. I am sorry, she said. I am so very sorry. Neil stared at her, every line of his face pulled tight. You kept a message from me, he said, for years, decades. Yes, she said. You let me think nobody else remembered enough to send anything, he said. You let me imagine the worst about him. She nodded. I did, she said. Tommy leaned forward. I wrote that note, he said. Not because I thought it'd fix anything. Because I didn't know what else to do with my guilt. You had no right to burn it. But I get why you wanted to. Margaret looked at him, startled. You do, she asked. He shrugged. I spent years wanting to burn every postcard, every Polaroid, every song that reminded me of her, he said. You just picked a different target. He scratched his beard. I can't give you absolution, he said. I can't say it's all right, because it was. But I can say this. You weren't the only one letting your pain make choices. We all did. Daniel's shoulders loosened just a hair. You could have told me, he said again, but less like an accusation, more like a statement of fact. I know, Margaret said, and you can tell me now, he said, all of it, even if it hurts. I'd rather know your worst moments than keep macking 'em up in my head. She nodded slowly. I can try, she said. Miss Carroll stepped into the room then, carrying a tray. Thought y'all might need some tea, she said, because that's what we do in the South. We have hard conversations and we pass the sugar. We talked for 2 hours, not in a neat, therapeutic circle, more like a pinball machine. Voices raised, then lowered, people standing up, then sitting back down. Long stretches where nobody said anything, just stared at the book. We didn't solve the mystery of what happened to Alina. How could we? The trail was colder than an old grave. Evidence had been lost, memories warped, people who might have known more buried under headstones now covered with moss. But we did something almost as important. We stopped letting our guesses punish each other. Daniel learned about the package, about the night Tommy had almost thrown the box away, but couldn't, about the note, about the way the book had moved across state lines tucked under a stranger's arm. Tommy learned about the cruel things Margaret had said over the years and why. She learned about the cruel things he'd said about her in return. They both flinched. They both apologized. Not perfectly, but sincerely. We all acknowledged the hole in the middle of the room. Girl we'd each known in our own way. The future she never got to have. The way that loss had rippled into decisions about marriages, children, careers, whether to stay in town or run. At one point, Daniel picked up the book and held it against his chest. I've lived my whole life in reaction to a question, he said. Every job I took, every woman I didn't marry, every time I decided not to leave this town, it all came back to, what if she comes home and I'm not here? He laughed a little, bitter and fond at the same time. She never did, he said. At least not the way I hoped. But this feels like part of her finally doing what she always did, coming back late with a story to tell. He laid the book back down. I don't forgive the universe, he said, but I can forgive y'all. Eventually, maybe, one conversation at a time. Later, as everyone was leaving, Margaret touched my arm. I didn't deserve your banana bread, she said. Probably not, I agreed. But forgiveness tastes better with butter, she snorted, which for her was practically a belly laugh. Over the next few weeks, the story of the returned book floated around town. Some folks rolled their eyes. Only in Magnolia would people get so worked up over a book, Mrs. Donnelly sniffed. Others took it to heart. Parents reminded their kids that small actions matter, that what you hide can haunt you, that what you return, even late, can heal something you didn't expect. The library put the house on Willow Creek in a little display case near the front desk, not to gawk at it like a museum piece, but to honor it. A handwritten card explained that it had been checked out in 1976 and returned in 2026, and that it had belonged to a beloved member of our community whose story remains unfinished. We started seeing more teenagers in the aisles again. Maybe it was coincidence. Maybe it was TikTok. Maybe it was something else. One afternoon, I sat at a table near the mystery section, helping my granddaughter Emma with her community college homework, when I saw a girl about 16 hovering near the display. She had dark hair pulled into a messy bun, earbuds dangling, chipped nail polish. She studied the case for a long time, then looked over at Miss Carroll. Does it feel weird having it back? She asked. Miss Carroll looked up from her computer. "It feels right," she said, "even if it hurts a little." Girl nodded. "My mama says stories are like ghosts," she said. "They stick around until somebody listens." "Your mama's a wise woman," I called over before I could stop myself. The girl smiled shyly. "Well, she listens to you," she said. "She plays your stories when she's cooking, says you sound like her grandma." I felt my cheeks warm. "Hope that's a compliment," I said. "It is," she said, then nodded at the case. "Feels like this one's finally got somebody listening." Life went on. It always does, even after big revelations and emotional showdowns in library back rooms. People still forgot to turn their books in on time. Kids still whispered in the aisles when they weren't supposed to. The county commission still tried to shave dollars off the budget, and Miss Carroll still showed up to every meeting with charts and cookies. Daniel started common by the library more, not just for fishin' magazines. Sometimes I'd see him in the fiction section, pickin' up novels he'd never have touched before. He took a creative writing class at the community center, said he wanted to get some of his memories of Alina on paper, while his mind still had more sentences than holes. Tommy started fixin' the library's leaky faucets and creaky doors for free, said it was cheaper than therapy. Margaret quietly stepped up her volunteer work in ways none of us expected. He started a scholarship fund in Alina's name for local kids who wanted to study literature or library science. She started shelving books instead of just bossing around people who did. Every time I saw her dusting the tops of shelves with one of those long-handled feather things, muttering about these kids and their fingerprints, I thought, she's still herself, just softened around the edges. That's all most of us can hope for, really. One day, near the end of summer, I was up in my own attic looking for an old photo album when I found a box I didn't recognize. It was shoved behind a trunk, half covered in a sheet. On the top, in my own handwriting, were the words, "Old school stuff do not throw away." I sighed. "Past June, you were not helpful," I muttered. I opened it anyway. Inside were notebooks from high school, folded notes from friends, a dried corsage, and at the very bottom, a stack of loose index cards. Library cards from the old days, from before everything went digital. I picked one up. Name, June Carter, book, To Kill a Mockingbird, due 3/12/74. I smiled. I did return that one, I said to no one. Then I saw a familiar last name on another card. Price, Alina, not for the house on Willow Creek, for something else, a poetry collection. She'd checked it out the winter before she disappeared. There in her handwriting was a quote scrawled in the margin of the card, probably written while she waited at the desk. "You can't bury a story," it said. "It will dig its way back to the light." No attribution, just that. I sat back on my heels and let the dust settle around me. "You were right, baby," I whispered. We'd spent 50 years trying to bury that story, under silence, under blame, under old routines and new excuses. And here it was, digging its way back into our hands through a book slot, through a carton of old mail, through a stubborn aunt, through a guilty boy, through an old woman who loved a library enough to treat it like her home, through a town that, for all its flaws, still showed up when it mattered. Sometimes, when I walk past the display case now, I swear I can feel Alina there. Not in a spooky, goosebump way, just in the sense that her name is Bane, spoken again not as a cautionary tale, not as a whispered scandal, but as a person we loved and lost. I like to think she'd be pleased that a book is at the center of it. She always did say stories were the closest thing to magic we had in this town. Maybe that's the real mystery we solved. Not what happened to her, because we still don't know, but what happened to us after she left. We grew hard in places we should have stayed soft. We closed doors we should have left open. We stayed quiet when we should have asked, "Are you hurting? How can I help you carry it?" The returned book didn't change the past. It didn't resurrect anyone. It didn't draw a neat red circle around the culprit on an old map. What it did was give us one small, tangible thing we could all touch and say, "I'm sorry, too. I'm sorry I blamed you. I'm sorry I didn't tell you. I'm sorry I ran. I'm sorry I stayed mad so long." Sometimes that's all you need to start. One object, one apology, one long overdue return. 200, 300 word closure, emotional wrap-up, life lesson, house family metaphor. When I think about what that blue cloth bound book did to our town, I don't picture a library anymore. I picture a house. Not just any house, but the kind so many of us grew up in here. Plain siding, crooked porch rails, front door that sticks when it rains. For years, that house had a room we didn't go into. We knew it was there. We felt the draft under the door. We heard the creaks at night. But we walked past it on our way to the kitchen, to the TV, to bed, telling ourselves, no sense in stirrin' up old dust. That room had a leaner's name on it. Inside sat boxes nobody opened, anger in one, guilt in another, questions in another. Folks moved out, babies were born, casseroles were baked, funerals were held, all while that door stayed shut, paint crackin' a little more each year. Then one morning, somebody slid a book back through a slot and knocked on that door without even knowing it. The house shuddered. The hinges complained. And one by one, the people who still lived there shuffled down the hall, keys in hand, hands shackin', hearts poundin'. We didn't swing the door wide and flood the room with sunshine all at once. We opened it a crack. We let our eyes adjust. We coughed on the dust. We argued about who'd stacked which box where. But we were in there, together. And in doing that, we changed the house. We didn't rebuild it. We didn't knock down walls and start fresh. We just acknowledged the room, swept the floor, carried a few boxes out to the porch to sort through in better light. Every family I know has a room like that. Every town does too. A story nobody wants to tell, but everybody feels. Sometimes it takes a long-lost book, or an old letter, or a phone call from a disconnected number to remind us that shut doors don't make hurt disappear. They just make it lonely. So if you feel a draft in your own house, in your own heart, maybe it's not a broken window. Maybe it's a story you've been pretending isn't yours. You don't have to fling the door open and invite the whole world in. Just crack it. Peek inside. See what box you're finally ready to carry to the kitchen table. Because houses don't fall apart from too much truth. They fall apart when we let secrets rot the beams. And sometimes, all it takes to start shoring up the foundation is one overdue thing, finally returned, laid between us like a truce. A book, a memory, a word we should have said years ago. I'm sorry. I remember. I'm still here.